I'm Graham King's Bishop of Sherborne. I'm fascinated by film and also by engaging in education with sixth formers. And so what we brought together today was various people from different faith communities to look at the Israel-Palestinian issue. I invited Peter Kosminski, this extraordinary film director and filmmaker who made The Promise for Channel 4, and he very kindly gave up the whole day. It's been 11 years in the making, that film. He had the story in 1947 of the diary of a British soldier, and he wove round it this 18-year-old girl, Erin, experiencing Israel-Palestine today. And through the interweaving of these two periods, with violence in both, it is just an extraordinary film. But Peter's genius idea was taking an 18-year-old girl, starting as completely naive, and suddenly her eyes being opened. It's been amazingly set up by the schools. The teachers are here. The students have engaged 300 sixth formers, 4 schools. Peter chose 3 clips he discussed with me. It's a controversial issue. It's been very carefully balanced in terms of the workshops and the presentations. Anne Clayton from Friends of Sabail, a Jerusalem-based ecumenical liberation theology centre. Glyn Secker was the skipper of the all-Jewish boat arrested at sea as he attempted to break the siege of Gaza. The Reverend Jonathan Herbert, he's based at Hillfield Friary at the moment, the Franciscan Centre. We have a Muslim academic from Bournemouth University in computer animation, Dr. Hamadi. We have a Palestinian who actually taught science at Sherborne Girls' School for some time. And we have Christian workers who worked with the World Council of Churches in Palestine, Diane from the Jews for Justice for Palestinians. We have a rabbi. Rabbi Danny Rich is the chief executive of liberal Judaism. Peter himself is Jewish. I'm a bishop. We're giving a picture from various perspectives, and we're being completely transparent and open in saying, well, we don't know.
I've had films banned. I've been sued. I've had death threats. I've had to go into hiding. But nothing prepared me for the level of abuse and vitriol that came my way as a result of this program.
Rabbi, what are you doing here?
Well, I'm a rabbi who has an interest in Israel and Zionism. I am both pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli, which is not an easy position to take in some parts of the community concerned.
Anyone got any idea where the abuse might have come from?
I'm a Zionist in the sense that I believe there is an Israeli narrative which now exists and has to be accommodated into the region. I believe that as a Jew that Israel, both as a place and an idea, is a central part of Judaism. I accept that's not what all Jews believe, but I do.
Yeah, the Jewish lobby, as it's colloquially called. I don't like that expression because I'm Jewish and I wasn't harassing me.
In the Jewish community, we're often accused of being self-hating Jews and even anti-Semites when we try and make space for alternative voices. We believe the only way is by dialogue and by holding both the narratives and learning to respect both those narratives.
The scene came from a documentary called Checkpoint, which was made by Israelis, and it was just a scene of the daily humiliation and degradation of Palestinians at Israeli checkpoints. So all I did was I took a few incidents from that hour-long documentary, put my characters into them, dramatized them, and stuck them in the middle of the film. I was shocked by what I saw in the documentary, and I thought if Erin witnessed this, she'd be shocked as well. So I wanted you to feel like she would feel. I'm not setting out to manipulate you. I just try to offer some alternative realities of which you might not have been aware. We're always told that the Middle East conflict goes back to biblical times. It's one of those nice, convenient phrases that makes you think, well, there's no point trying to fix it because it's a given. It's in the DNA. It's not true, actually, funnily enough. I interviewed a woman who talked about how they used to run in and out of each other's houses as children, you know, in shared villages. What happened really was the Nazis, at least in my view. The Nazis set out to exterminate the Jews, or certainly to try to exterminate them from Europe. This was a traumatized group of people. And in many ways, what's happening in the Middle East, it seems to me, is the last battle of the Second World War. As those, the descendants of those people who, you know, who basically said never again, try to establish a place of security. Unfortunately, it's a place where other people were already living. The truth is that when I read the 80 interviews with the old soldiers, there was a common theme emerged. When they first arrived, they saw the Jews as the underdogs because of what they'd witnessed them experiencing in Nazi Germany and the Nazi-occupied territories. By the time they'd spent a bit of time in what was then called Palestine, the Jews had the Palmach and the Haganah and the various military organizations, and at least from the British squaddies' point of view, who'd been sort of harassed and blown up and kidnapped, confined to barracks by those Jewish organizations, insurgents we would call them now, they saw the Arabs as the underdogs. The British squaddies always have a feeling of sympathy for the underdog. But nonetheless, the transition in their attitudes over 3 years was clear, it was unambiguous, and it was consistent. So this film, just to be faithful to its research, was always going to end up expressing that view, the view that came through the writings and the interviews of these soldiers. This clip is juxtaposing two huge explosions with the grandfather and the granddaughter being caught up in both. As a writer of film, to put the two of them pretty much simultaneously in explosions 60 years apart was compelling. There's a lot about the suffering of the Palestinians in the film, and I wanted to also make the point that there were suicide bombings going off in Israeli cities, not necessarily to explain or justify, but just to get a more, to get a balanced picture.
We believe it's a Jewish duty and it's a human duty, and we believe, well, we're Palestinians, but we're not, it would be our Palestinian duty to try and promote a peaceful resolution to the tragic conflict, which is a tragedy for both sides.
Len, Erin's grandfather, is a sergeant in the British paratroopers, and he's been attending a meeting in the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, which was the headquarters of the British Army in Palestine, and a massive bomb has exploded. What is the Middle East? It's another botched up decolonization, I'm afraid. Britain was the colonial power in Palestine in 1948 when that area was carved up.
I believe the Jews were always present in the region. Doesn't believe that when the State of Israel was founded it was an empty, this myth is that somehow it was empty. No, it wasn't. So I would accept that, Palestinians have a just reason for being distressed about the State of Israel.
We were busy decolonizing India And we made a good job of that, didn't we? We partitioned India and Pakistan, and they've had, what, 3 wars since? That was a fantastic effort of the Foreign Office. And at the same time, we were, almost as an afterthought, getting out 100,000 troops out of Palestine. 100,000 troops, that's the size of the British Army today. We made a mess of it.
There was a problem about the displacement of Jews after Europe, which needed to be resolved, and I'm sure from a Palestinian perspective they feel that was resolved wholly at their expense.
I'm not suggesting for a minute that it was an easy job. Those soldiers had a very, very tough time, and the promise shows that. But in the end, it was our responsibility to leave the place in good order, and we didn't. So, you know, when you look at that stuff on the news, when you see some bomb going off or some riot, and you think it's nothing to do with us, well, actually it is. People of your grandparents' generation, you know, were ultimately responsible for that mess. And part of the purpose of making the promise was to remind us all that although it seems like something that's a long time ago and far away and very, very sad and completely insoluble and nothing to do with us, it is actually. I don't know what you as individuals can do, but it's just useful to know that we have some responsibility for what is probably the most dangerous and intractable conflict in the world today.
I had no idea what was going on until today.
You don't see this on the news, do you?
I feel like quite a lot of the time the news do try and seize it for their own ends.
It's ignored more than anything, but I suppose it's probably a good thing it's being brought back to the public eye.
I mean, generally speaking, you know, most of television is pretty safe, isn't it? But in terms of ideas, in terms of things that really stop you think, shit, affect your worldview, it's pretty homogenous, really. So I sort of see my role as to make a bit of mischief, you know, to sort of shake things up. You know, and some of the ideas I was advancing this morning were designed to provoke you a bit.
It's from episode 3 of The Promise, and it's set in the town of Hebron, a city that's very important to both Jews and to Palestinians. Erin is trying to find the family known to her grandfather to whom she can return this key. The lawyers, when they read it, there's no way you can include that.
Why? Why are you just standing there doing nothing? What's the point of you being here if you don't even try and stop them?
Then you show them a piece of documentary footage on which it's based, and it proves that it happened.
How did you find that documentary?
It was sent to me by a Scandinavian documentary maker who knew I was doing it and wanted me to see it. But it is available on YouTube. In the period of Len, the grandfather in the promise, most of the peoples of the world had a lot of sympathy for the Jews, what they'd been through, you know, what the extermination that had been attempted by the Nazis. Most people thought the Jews deserved a place of safety somewhere. 60 years later, in Erin's time frame, you know, it's isolated, feared and hated, to be honest, in equal measure by its neighbours. And you know, if it weren't for the determined support of the United States, undoubtedly under existential threat. How have they managed to squander the pretty much unanimous goodwill of the world in such a short space of time? And why is it, to an outside observer, that people that suffered such disgusting racism themselves in the middle of the 20th century should now be turning very similar tactics, at least at a superficial examination on another dispossessed minority?
What's your immediate reaction to what you've just seen?
Yeah, mostly shocked because of how little it's covered in the media. Like, I had no idea about any of this. Stuff like Nazi Germany, you know so much about.
It's quite a powerful film when you see people being, you know, girls being chucked stones out by little Jewish boys, and the fact that, you know, people didn't do anything to stop it.
I couldn't work out why there was this massive hatred towards people they'd never met, and they just hated them for no reason other than where they're from.
Public awareness is raised enough, then I suppose it will become a matter of government issue that they'll have to act on.
I think you only really ever learn and change your ways when you're truly shocked by something. Because today I was completely shocked by the actions of some of the people in Israel and Palestine.
I hope that one or two of you might feel galvanised by the things you've heard today. And the world is a pretty sorry place at the moment, and we kind of need you guys to be engaged in trying to fix it.
I think that the promise is itself an inspiring piece of work and should lead us to think about the situation in Israel-Palestine and our responsibilities there. It does seem to me that the two-state solution is the only viable medium-term solution.
Maybe the way I would really look at it is a single state, multi-religious, multicultural, as we have in the UK.
I come back from Rabbi Daniel on that.
The problem is that suits the Palestinian narrative, but it doesn't suit the Israeli narrative. And whether we like it or not, the Israeli demand is for a primary Jewish state.
You know, a number of politicians that I elected and that the American people my age have elected have just ignored this problem.
I will agree that the rate we're going, the Israelis are creating one state anyway. It will be impossible to create two states, because if the Israelis eat up any more of the Palestinian land with settlements, it won't be possible to have a two-state solution.
Without justice, I just hardly can see a solution, and there are millions of people who want to go back to their religion, to their villages and their cities. Dr. Hassan here is one of them, and without solving that issue, even if we try to make those fancy two states, what would we do with those 4 millions?
Yes, I'd love to go back to Palestine. In our talks earlier on, I talked a lot about my childhood and so on, and the memories and the olive groves, land which was taken without compensation.
I made one point in my talk, which was that technically as a Jew I have the right of return to Israel, take up citizenship with all the benefits that would entail. But I personally would never do that, because I don't believe it would be the right thing to do, because there were thousands of Palestinians expelled from the area in 1948, and I would not want to take part in taking land.
After 40 years of absence from Palestine, my wife, she said, "You must go now, you've got a British passport." We went back, walking through the village. My wife said to my brother-in-law, can we go down to Al-Arais? And he laughed and he said, if you go down, you will be shot by a settler from the settlement.
With the world economic system on the point of collapse, with the old political certainties under threat, America and the EU dropping back, and with these popular uprisings all over the world, it's a very, very brave man, somebody much braver than me, who would predict where things are going to go.
What I'm pleased about is the change of attitude in the British population towards the Palestinian, because they started to understand that justice should be found for my poor people.
I won't give you a prediction, but I'll give you a heartfelt wish that the suffering of the Palestinians should come to an end, because it's a disgrace and a blot on the conscience of the world that we have allowed them to suffer for so long and looked away. So all I would say, rather than a prediction, is a wish that you and your generation will deal with this matter more effectively than we have.